Greetings, my name is Ian Yarwood and I'm bringing you this YouTube video clip from Perth, Western Australia, where I work as a lawyer. From the 16th of November 2017, I started reading some most informative news reports of a coroner's inquest in Sussex. The experience was a complete breath of fresh air. It was a breath of fresh air for two reasons. Firstly, because of the frank but polite observations of the learned senior coroner, Mr. Alan Craze, and secondly, because some journalists had actually recorded and published his comments. The deceased, whose name is Andrew Apperley, died on the Thai island of Koh Phangan in February 2017 in mysterious circumstances. Now, this particular island is located in the Gulf of Thailand between two other very well-known islands, being Koh Samui and Koh Tao. Now, Koh Tao, as some of you will know, has been dubbed Death Island by the international media following a string of tourist deaths, and some of those deaths being murders and some in mysterious circumstances. Now, context is very important to any story, so I'll just show you a list of 13 deaths of Caucasian tourists on the island of Koh Tao that were either murders, suspicious deaths, or fatal accidents. And there's a list of them here. Now, the first point I'm going to make about that list is that given that the population is relatively small and it's a tiny island, when I say the population's small, it has a lot of visitors, but many of them are only there for a brief period of time. So at any given point in time, the population is quite small. And in the circumstances, the number of deaths and murders is exceptionally high. Now, the Thai authorities do go to great lengths to deny that a Thai could have murdered a tourist. Indeed, the current military dictator, General Prayut, made the absurd statement that no Thai could have murdered David Miller and Hannah Witheridge when their battered bodies were found on Samui Beach on the 15th of September 2014. In fact, high-ranking police officers decided to echo his words later on. It was a dreadful example of a political leader interfering in a police investigation and a subsequent trial. Ultimately, two powerless Burmese migrant workers were framed for those murders and now languish on death row in the Bangkok Hilton. Other deaths are routinely dismissed as suicides or as accidents, even where the most casual of observers would be suspicious. Most of the other deaths on the list have attracted misinformation and red herrings, not just from the Thai police, but also from expats who live and or work on the island. Now, many people who live outside Thailand, who live in Western countries, have got very little appreciation of the magnitude of the corruption problem in a place like Thailand. Thailand is ranked towards the highly corrupt end of the Corruption Perceptions Index at 101 of 176. while the following Western countries are ranked closer to the clean end. USA is ranked 18 of 176, Australia is ranked 13, the UK 10, Canada 9, and New Zealand 1. So in a lot of the Western countries, when coroners receive police reports, they tend to rely upon them. Whereas police reports that come out of a very corrupt country shouldn't really be relied upon too heavily. But it's difficult unless the coroner has some understanding of how corrupt the relevant country is. Now, before I go on to the reports of the coroner's inquest, I'll start with a screenshot of a WhatsApp conversation that Andrew Apperley was involved with just before he passed away. The first report is that from the BBC on the 16th of November, and given that it's a very brief report. I'll read the whole lot, and I will have links to all of these reports below. So please go below for links to a number of articles. The report reads, an investigation into the death of a British tourist in Thailand has been branded, quote, medieval, end quote, by a coroner. Sussex coroner Alan Craze made the criticism at the inquest into the death of Andrew Apperley, whose body was found on the island of Koh Phangan. Thai investigating officer Sudeep Chatterkan had given Mr. Apperley's cause of death as asphyxiation by drowning, but Mr. Craze said the cause of death was unascertained because of poor information provided to him. Mr. Apperley was reported missing after failing to return to his hotel following a full moon party in February. His body was found 4 days later. At the hearing in Eastbourne, Mr. Crace also said a toxicology report carried out by Thai authorities was, quote, medieval, unquote. Because of the extent the body had decomposed by the time British pathologists could carry out their own investigation, they were unable to find a clear cause of death, the court heard. In a statement read out by Mr. Craze, Police Captain Chatterkan said a post-mortem examination found no signs of trauma or external wound consistent with a struggle. He said 38-year-old Mr. Apperley, quote, was drinking and taking other substances and became delusional, end quote, during the party and, quote, walked into the sea where rocks extended out into deep water and drowned, end quote. However, the family previously told the BBC they were pressing the Thai authorities to investigate further because they suspected foul play. They had found text messages on his phone dating from the 13th of February, suggesting he felt in danger, they said. Mr. Apperley, who was raised in Gloucestershire and had a young daughter, was staying in a hotel on the island of Koh Samui. From there he headed by boat for the party on Koh Phangan. Mr. Craze recorded an open conclusion on the cause of his death. I'll now go to an article from The Independent, and there'll be links for this below as well. It's dated the 16th of November, and the author is Flora Thompson. And I'll read just a few paragraphs. Coroner Alan Craze said there was a lack of evidence from the Thai authorities who had not carried out a toxicology report. He said, quote, there's pretty much no control on the island. Police presence will have been hit and miss. I'm not being rude about the Thai authorities. I've been there many times. I love the country. But in terms of my job as a coroner, it's hit and miss as to whether I will get useful information or not. I'm not getting sufficient or sufficiently reliable information. I think it's down to resources, end quote. Mr. Apperley had a history of drug taking, liked to party and regularly visited Thailand, the inquest heard. Mr. Craze said the post-mortem found no signs of a struggle, bruising or trauma, adding, quote, he led a bohemian lifestyle, he took drugs. I personally think I'm not going to find any evidence of foul play, end quote. Now the next report, which in many respects is my favourite, is from the Eastbourne Herald, and the author is Ginny Sanderson. And again, I'll read just a couple of paragraphs. However, the post-mortem report by Dr. Mark Taylor found he had no injuries and said the cause of death was unascertained. Coroner Alan Craze said there was insufficient evidence of foul play. He called the Thai authorities' toxicology, quote, almost medieval, end quote. As he said, quote, they haven't even taken a blood sample to check for alcohol levels, unquote. He asked, quote, is it in the interests of Thailand's tourist trade, end quote. Mr. Craze also said there was no evidence Mr. Apperley had drowned, as the Thai police had asserted. He said, quote, they haven't got any evidence pointing towards drowning, for instance, froth in the airways, unquote. He described their methods as, quote, 40 years behind the time, unquote. He said the toxicology would have been a key part of the evidence to find out what happened to Mr. Apperley, who enjoyed a party lifestyle and had, Mr. Craze said, quote, on many occasions been in trouble with police for having drugs, unquote. However, Mr. Craze said, quote, I have insufficient evidence to reach a conclusion of accidental death or dependence on drugs or misadventure. This will have been a devastating tragedy, so I express my condolences and sympathy to you. Now finally, I'll turn to a later report on the 20th of November from the Samui Times, which has broken a lot of stories about deaths on Koh Tao. And I'll just quote the final paragraph because it puts everything into context as it discusses some other deaths. So here we go. This is not the first time Thai investigations have been called into question. They were called into question over the lack of toxicology report for British Christina Marion Annesley, who was found dead on Koh Tao in January 2015. The DNA presented in the case against Zor Lin and Wai Pyo, who were found guilty of killing Hannah Witheridge and David Miller in September 2014, was highly suspect as it had been tested in an unaccredited laboratory. The families of both Nick Pearson and Luke Miller are far less than satisfied into the investigation into their deaths, and Pat Harrington is currently compiling a petition to ask the UK government to investigate deaths in Thailand after she lost her son Ben Harrington in circumstances she finds highly suspect. The murder of Elise Dalimagna from Belgium on Koh Tao has never been solved, and Russian Valentina Novosenova is still missing from the island. Now, one feature of reports from the Thai police, both to overseas authorities such as coroners, but also to the media, is that they are full of red herrings. And these red herrings tend to distract people, especially journalists, who have to get their stories out within a very limited time frame. And the red herrings are produced not just by the Thai authorities and the Thai police, but they're also expats who live on some of these islands who routinely help with producing red herrings. One of the better known people in question is a Stephen Dryly. I've produced a YouTube video about him in the past, and I would invite you to go and view that YouTube video as it touches on some of the other people who have perished on Koh Tao. Some of the people on this very list here. For example, in the case of Shelley Bhatt, who was a Canadian lady, she died after being struck by a taxi boat that took a shortcut, and Mr. Dryly said that she was in a boat lane, whereas all the reliable evidence says that she was not. Also, Mr. Dryly had said that the fellow Luke Miller had died as a result of an accident, but we've got some screenshots of conversations he had with the editor of the Samui Times, in which he made it clear that he thought that Luke Miller had been in a fight, judging by the injuries on his body. In addition, Mr. Dryly had said that Elise Dalimagna's body had been found on a neighbouring island and not on Koh Tao. There's just a few examples, but there are others of other people who have been involved in providing misinformation. I'll also provide a link to this story, which has got the headline, "Russian tourist found dead in Phuket hotel with 7 stab wounds. Police conclude it was suicide." And that is the standard of police investigation. As I said, I'll have some links below, but in the meantime, this is my Twitter account. So I've got many stories on the Twitter account as well. Feel free to investigate that. Thank you very much for viewing, and have a pleasant day and stay safe. And there was a petition mentioned. I'll have a link to that petition below as well. Thank you very much. Have a pleasant day.